Explicit content. TheVoiceBeforeTheVoid.net. Brian, Lola, and the Texas Swingers Club. From Eloquent as Fuck by Sarah Young. Read by The Voice Before the Void. Sarah Young is a body-positive artist and writer. Find more of her work at eloquentasfuck.com. I'm rolling around on a black rubbery plastic sheet with Brian, Lola, and Otis. Lola and Otis are naked for the most part. I think Otis still has his socks on. I could be judgmental about this, but I am still wearing my shoes. Brian is naked as well. Lola and Brian are married. So is Otis. But not to Lola and Brian. That would be weird. I am doing my best to ignore the people watching me fuck Brian. Doing my best to focus on my body, to focus on his body, and not think about the fact that there are people commenting, clapping, and laughing all around us. This is my first time. I come in and out of orgasmic consciousness and feel wonderful, then ridiculous, then embarrassed, then aroused, then distracted. I have never felt so many things at once while fucking. So many things that I am confused as to whether I love or hate it. Brian lives in Texas, and he is the easiest person I have ever dated. I don't see him much, maybe once every 3 or 6 months. When we talk, we often discuss the other people we are dating. Last month, out of the blue, he asked me if I wanted to come down for a visit. In July. It sounded hot, temperature-wise, but I figured new state, new experiences. I went to Texas over the weekend of the 4th, and Lola, Brian, and I sat by their pool, drank beer, talked, and got to know each other. We also had sex. We all slept in the same bed. It was easy. Much easier than I thought it would be. Then again, with Brian, it is always easy. Then we go to the Swingers Club. Hanging out with Lola and Brian in public is a test for my confidence. I am basically hanging out with two very beautiful, statuesque humans, while trying my best not to look like a mushroom growing next to them in the... trying my best not to look like a mushroom growing next to them in the shade. They look and smell great. I don't wear deodorant. Their looks are highly stylized and contemporary. I am trying my best to arrange my hair so that it doesn't look like I just got up from a nap. I do what I can, then I forget about it, which is easy, because it is easy to forget almost anything when you walk into a swingers club in Texas. Otis is already at the club. He looks like a typical IT nerd among the crowd of youngish, fit, scantily clad Texans. He is very nice, respectful, and articulate. At some point in the evening, he and Lola head upstairs to get to know each other better. Brian and I hang out and talk a bit, then eventually follow them upstairs. Brian is crazy about Lola. They have been married for over 2 decades, and he cherishes her. It is wonderful to be around. The first time I asked him what type of porn he likes, he responded, Lola porn. I had no idea that he was referring to his wife, so I acted cool and pretended to know what he was talking about. We find them upstairs and watch as they make out. Then we walk over, and Brian leaves me alone with them. Lola reaches up, pulls me to her, and kisses me. Soft, nice. It makes my head spin. It is still spinning when Otis asks me something. I don't quite remember now what words he used, but in effect, he asked me if I wouldn't mind. Mind what? I respond. And he says, if I kiss you. This is the very first time someone has ever asked me if he could kiss me, and it happens to be in a swingers club in Texas. After a while, Brian returns, and Lola and Otis stand up. Lola turns to Brian and says, we're going downstairs. They were going to have sex. In a room full of strangers. This is the kind of stuff that I only read about in Bellingham, Washington. Brian decides to wait a bit, then go watch. When we do, I am taken aback by the geeky IT guy. He is hammering Lola. I mean, maybe not hammering her, but given his effect, his vigor and confidence are surprising. Brian looks down at me, points at Lola, enjoying herself on the rubbery plastic sheets, and says with a smile on his face, he is fucking my wife. Otis looks up, smiles at us, and politely asks us to join. We climb up on the bed, because it is about 4 feet off the ground. Brian gets up there with no problem. Then I start undressing Brian. This is one of my favorite things to do with him. It makes me feel like I am manhandling a giant, even though he could crush me in an instant if he wanted. Even pretend danger is sexy to me. One time, I was attempting to hold just one of Brian's arms down, and he lifted me up and threw me across the bed. The memory of that alone is enough to get me going. After his clothes come off, we start to have sex. There is a scene from When Harry Met Sally where Harry is talking about a dream where he's being scored by Olympic judges on his sexual abilities. In the end, his score is ruined by his mother, who has disguised herself as an East German judge. This is very close to what it was like having sex in a sex club, minus my mother. People openly comment, cheer, and even touch you when you are least expecting it. To the point that sex becomes something of a team-building activity. I'm not sure exactly what kind of team we were building there, but we certainly got plenty of feedback from all the helpful folks around us. Looking back on that whirlwind of an evening, I have to say, even now, is the rubbery plastic sheet that has stayed with me. I mean, I understand why they use them, but more distracting than the cheering crowds or the hammering Otis was the strange feeling under my bum as Brian was doing his best to do his best with me. I mean, nothing absorbs into rubbery plastic sheets. You really have no idea what you're rolling around in, and though the club provides fresh ones after each set of people finish, it is not a feeling I would say is very sexy, especially when the sheet starts coming off the mattress and entangles itself in Brian's feet. At the end of the night, or the beginning of the morning, Lola, Brian, Otis, and I were heading out, and Brian turned to Otis, reached out to shake his hand, and said, "Otis, thank you for fucking my wife." Otis, being the gentleman that he is, took his hand, shook it, and replied, "Anytime." They are so polite down there in Texas.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Where did that come from?
That's off this blog. It's called Eloquent as Fuck.
You find these things.